Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Innovation Storytellers Show. I'm your host, Susan Lindner. And today we're talking about maybe a little overlooked corner of the innovation space, and that is design. How many of you, when you're thinking about the next new product and service that you're creating, are actively thinking about what it's going to look like, how it's going to work for the customer, how it's going to feel, what is the emotion it's going to generate when people are using this cool new thing that you've created? So today we're going to get into the nuts and bolts around design and some of the misconceptions of design. And I'm hoping my guest will also be able to give us some pointers and some tips on how to really bring design thinking and the design process center stage when it comes to creating our next levels of innovation. It's why I'm really thrilled that Anthony Di Bitonto is joining us today on the show. Anthony improves people's lives and drives growth through the design of physical and digital, and sometimes even phygital, we'll get into that, products and services. As Senior Director of Physical Experience Design at J&J Design, he led cross-functional teams creating the VELY, right, Robotic Assisted Solution Platform, Janssen Pharma self-injection devices and packaging, and Tylenol Smart Check, not to mention J&J's consumer-first medical device in North America. So having senior people on the show is really exciting because we get to hear tales from the front lines and from the best of the best. So Anthony, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, you. I'm really excited to be talking with you.
So, we think about design, right? Maybe we see those brilliant car commercials with the aerodynamics, right? And the wind going over the top of a Porsche. Or we think about breakthrough design like Johnny Ive's iPod, the first time we saw that click wheel and thought, wow, what a cool way to navigate through music in a way that we never really had before. Tell us a little bit, how did you get into this place? How did you start your own design career and that segue into innovation?
All right. So I'm going to go way back. So as a kid, I just really loved to make things and tinker, right? And this led me to study architecture first. And then I got my master's in industrial design. And industrial design really became my medium to innovate with people. So early in my career, I was designing, as an industrial designer, designing products from healthcare to consumer electronics and housewares as well. And I'd say my most formative years were designing at Smart Design. I experienced a Smart Design. So I was there for 19 years. And we innovated. One of the things we focused on a lot in the first years I was there was designing products for OXO good grips. And OXO...
I love that company, by the way. Every gadget in my kitchen is from OXO. I just love them. It's so thoughtful. Like just something simple like a measuring cup where you can actually peer down and see how much is in the cup as opposed to always having to hold up the measuring cup and look at the markings on the side. Like, it's just brilliant thinking. I'm like, why didn't anyone think of this? Yes.
So there's a couple of things going on there. One is, at first, the OXO Good Grips brand was developed. They're one of the pioneers in universal design. So it's developed.
Wait, and what is that, by the way? What is universal design?
What does that mean? That means you're addressing the needs of people with arthritis, with physical impairments, right? So with arthritis. And that meant we'd actually test with people with arthritis when we design these products. But the hypothesis, which has actually been, the heart of inclusive design as well, is that if the products are better for them, they're better for everybody. So they can get more comfortable for them to use, right? Because they have a hard time bending down to look at this measuring cup and to peel carrots. And if it's much easier for them to use, it's going to be easier for everybody to use. It's going to be more comfortable, it'll be more intuitive. And that's really important because the critical thing there is that design is about people and not just things. So you're really starting with people's needs, right? To drive these experiences. And I think the same thing could be said about innovation. It should be always about people and not things, So I think that's really critical. That was, for me, was really a very critical learning early on in my career.
That's a really important pause, by the way. We're not just making stuff and innovating stuff, inventing stuff for the sake of it. It might start that way. But in the end, it's for the people.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Not our... But go ahead.
And so as designers, what we're doing is, so that's the thing as well. So there's the word innovation and the word design. They're not the same, one and the same. They're two different things, right? So designers will be part of an innovation team. On an innovation team, you could have scientists, you could have business people, it goes across the gamut, which you're all familiar with. But designers, sometimes they might be leading a team, not always, but as designers, we're responsible to create the experiences, right, which people have as they use a new product or service. In other words, this is what people experience functionally and emotionally as they use these products. So what does that mean? So functionally, it could be ergonomics. How easy is a product to use? How comfortable? How intuitive is it to use? And this goes across physical and digital, right? So the great thing in the Apple iPhone, and you're making a picture bigger, you're like spreading your fingers. That's so intuitive, right? You don't need to teach people how to do that. They've done that before, right? So that's the kind of stuff. So functionally, we're really looking to solve for something that's going to be super easy to use. And then always by testing with people, actually seeing that it makes sense. And then emotionally, that's really about a brand, right? A brand has particular attributes, which you think about, you remember when you use a product. So we're trying to inject those qualities in an experience to differentiate it and make it memorable. You mentioned a Porsche before. It's about being fast and performing. Every detail that goes in there is about that. So, but that's not enough. So that's the emotional and functional, and we're designing those experiences. And that's what design does. They bring those future experiences to life. So inherently, that's going to be, you're innovating, and you'll be working cross-functionally with a lot of different partners. And this is another piece that's really important is when we work in innovation teams, design, because we're creating future experiences, we have the ability to really show people what the future could be as we make these experiences. Iterate, we think this is what the future experience should be. We put it in front of people and they hate it. So we make something else. We'll have multiples, and this is what's starting to answer their needs. We're sort of suspending disbelief, taking them to the future and having to imagine what this future experience could be. So as we do that, we're working with cross-functional teams. We're working with scientists who might be coming up with new potions or lotions or medications, whatever it is. We'll be working with engineers, mechanical engineers, regulatory people are making sure it's safe. Business people want to make sure we can make money on this, right? So all these people, we're showing them these future experiences. And that's why you might say it's a design-led project, because that's what's getting everybody excited about what the future of this innovation could be, right? So we're making to learn and then iterating with that. And at J&J, the former CEO, Alex Gorski, when we present him in our process and, projects, he used to like to call design the force multiplier, because we multiply the talents of all the different, functions working on projects. The great scientists we have, the great engineers, the great business people, we're multiplying all that because we're, basically showing what the future could be and helping everybody gather behind that and create future experiences. That's super exciting. And then finally, I think within design, you mentioned before, I was a senior director of physical experience design. So what does that mean? So I create physical and digital products and services. Sometimes I like to call it digital. So I really focus on, there'll be connected products, such as they could be medical devices and equipment. I'll be talking about one hopefully soon. And then pharma devices. So pharma devices is what you use to inject medications. People are often self-injecting at home now. So, healthcare is coming into the home. And then in consumer health, which used to be part of J&J, I'd be designing a lot of connected devices and packaging as well for things like Listerine, Johnson's Baby. And so that's where I'm at right now. That was my most recent role.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about this, because I can, in my mind here, it's about the concept, it's about the product. Like the design is really secondary to the innovation itself. What's the story that you tell other innovation leaders so that they make the design part of the process?
Well, I think it's important is that we show them the experiences that could be future experiences and the reactions that people have as they're using these future experiences. And that will usually convince stakeholders that this is the direction we should take our existing product line or new innovation. And that really goes a long way. Those stories that you have of people using your products and saying, oh, wow, it's so much easier for me to inject with this new syringe. I was never able to do that before, where I could open this package and now I've gained my independence. When I couldn't get to my pills before because it was really hard for me to do that. And I would always have to have somebody else do that for me. These are stories which we'll often videotape. and show them to stakeholders and say, if we do this, if we invest this money, it's going to be, significant investment. It could make a big difference in terms of helping people's lives. And because of that, it's going to drive growth.
Yeah. How much is it processed? The storytelling is more a show me, don't tell me kind of thing, because design is such a visual medium and a tactile medium, right?
Yeah, you have to let people using your future experience, that has to be the proof. If you just tell them this is going to be better, they're not going to believe you. They're going to think you're a salesman. You have to actually show people using the future experience saying, wow, I thought I was happy with what I had, but this is so much better.
Right. I'm such a words girl, right, as a storyteller. And yet, this is something like, I love the way you're describing it. We're talking about creating future experiences, right? I can't say I've had a lot of people on the show who talk about, we're in the business of creating future experiences. I'm in the business of creating a new innovation. I'm in the business of creating a new thing. But when you really start from the customer's perspective, you say, I'm in the business of creating future experiences. Can you walk us through a little bit about the process of how you do it? I'm first fascinated by the emotional component, because I think it's a place where sometimes our scientific leaders fall down a little bit. They're so excited by the thing that we don't think about. And I always tell people this when they're writing great stories, it's emotion that drives action, not facts. Right. So do you start off saying, how do I want my customer to feel? And then try to build the experience from there? Or do you start with the frustration and say, I'm going to counteract the pain of doing it the old-fashioned way, of the status quo way today?
Well, you don't always know what the solution is going to be.
Oh,
So you start with the frustration first, right? And you might have some hypotheses for what that solution might be.
okay.
Because you're often wrong. So you got to actually put them in front of people and say, how would this, if you imagine yourself using this in the future, would it actually be improving this, improving your life as you're injecting, this medication into your arm, or as you're trying to solve for a kid who has an ear infection in the middle of the night. So things like that, you have to come up with concepts, put them in front of people and see that they're actually going to be improving their lives, and then craft the experience around what is connecting with people functionally and emotionally.
And, I think about, some of the breakthroughs that we've seen in self-injection, right? I don't know that Ozempic would be as wildly successful as it is if it didn't build on the technologies around diabetes, right? About insulin delivery and things like that, and the ease of being able to give yourself a very powerful medicine right at home for the rest of your life.
Right. Yeah, this is not a medication I'm as familiar with, but yes, that's something which I think that ease of use and being able to inject yourself in your home is something which has made that a much more user-friendly experience. Absolutely.
Yeah. And can you think of other innovations that we might have seen that kind of died on the vine because the design process wasn't really worked through appropriately? And then, an iteration came out later where it's now highly effective. Like, I remember growing up as a kid and thinking about, gosh, these poor kids with asthma, how challenging these inhalers are, right? Of having to bring them around everywhere. It's, a pretty straightforward device. But what we see today, the ability to modulate dosing, for example, or, even for different age groups, like the width of it or the intensity of it, et cetera. And not to mention how the inhalers being used for lots of different things today, not just asthma medications.
Yeah. And those are difficult products as well because they have to be safe. So there's a lot of regulatory steps which go into that process. But I think, again, really over time, testing with people, and I think testing for those extremes is what really helps in those cases. People with dexterity challenges, with visual impairment, with cognitive impairment as well. Testing with them, testing in those extremes will have you come up with products that are going to be easier for everybody to use. And I think that's really critical as well. So making sure that as you have prototypes and you put them in front of people, that you're trying to come up with a solution which everybody could use. And I think that's really, so it's not just good enough, but it's actually great for everybody because you went to those extremes.
Yeah. It's, I think about like where design impacts my life on a day-to-day basis. I think about the knives in my kitchen,
Mhm.
and the rule of thumb is the standard chef's knife, right? It's about 8 inches long. It's pretty heavy. It's got a tang that goes all the way back to the end of the handle and I'm gripping it. But for me, with my little hands, like it feels like such overkill. And it's been such a revelation to me in my own kitchen just to find someone knives for shorter people with shorter appendages
Right.
than 6 foot tall Anthony Bourdain style. I gotta hack up a carcass today and make some snout to tail giant feast for someone. I'm like, I'm chopping vegetables and trying to make a stir fry at the end of the night. Is there a time where going from professional to novice, like where finding those niches is really where the prosperity lies, is saying, okay, this isn't the thing for everyone, right? Or this isn't for the person with the most extreme experience or the greatest challenged experience, but rather I'm going to segment my design across lots of different populations and say this is for this group versus the other. Are we thinking about innovation in a way that caters not just to the all, but to narrow subsets? And do we need to be thinking that way?
Well, I think there are products where it's going to be definitely more tailored to a particular person. It's a custom product, right? Sure. But when you're investing in tooling, right, for something like a surgical piece of equipment, you'll have to make sure that everybody could use it. If it's a pair of glasses, there'll be size to different people, sure. But for example, we're working on, you mentioned before, the Velis robotic surgery device. So in that case, it's orthopedic surgery. And that's like carpentry, if you can imagine, for probably for
These guys who come in with saws,
yeah,
right?
if you use the device to replace people's knees, right?
Yeah.
So that field, because of what it is, it's a male-dominated field. So, and you're not going to have several robots, one for female surgeons, one for male surgeons to use. It's as it is. It's expensive for a hospital to buy, one of them. So you have to early on consider. In the past, they were always considering just men, because that's the way they were men designed for men, right? So you have to consider gender diversity in the people you test with. So that's when they're into the extremes. It could be not that extreme. It could actually be pretty basic. So that you ensure that everybody's going to be using this device can actually use it effectively. Because if you're using a tool which is too big for you, you're in a surgical room, that's going to make a big difference how successful you're going to be. And it's the same, the inhaler. If it's too hard for you to use and you don't have the force, but you also happen to have arthritis, then you won't be able to use it. So it's a question of looking at those pretty realistic, what are extremes, but they're inclusive design. And I think that's something, inclusive design is actually something which I think is an innovation is often overlooked. And I think I'm always very much an advocate of making sure we include people with its physical, visual, and cognitive in our user base.
Yeah. Which naturally is going to hit when it becomes commercialized, right? It's going to hit a larger spectrum of the market. I'm thinking about, what does the apex runner need that's different from me going for a walk, on a Saturday afternoon in my Apple Watch?
Right.
Thinking about the design needs of those, or the triathlete who has to, jump into the ocean and swim with that watch, as opposed to me, who's probably not going to take it. I was probably going to take it off if I'm doing a couple of laps in my pool.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And there's that balance of bespoke, custom designs, right? There's times when that makes sense, but quite often we don't get that luxury in some of the healthcare products. They need to be more, designed for everybody. So designed for all, then inherent in that is inclusivity is really important, and accessibility. Okay. Sometimes we might even have things like people are colorblind. Many surgeons are colorblind.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's quite interesting as well. So that again, in the Velis robotic assisted, surgery assisted platform we designed, we knew that many of the surgeons were colorblind. So we designed the screens. As we were designing the screens, we had a simulator which would show us what people with color blindness would experience, so we could make sure that the screens were safe and effective for them to use. And this accessibility is critical. Otherwise, they'd be making mistakes in the surgical room.
That's pretty incredible. I'd never contemplated whether asking my surgeon whether or not he or she was colorblind.
Yeah.
Thank God we're not dealing with like cut the red wire, not the green wire, right? I mean, it's like, that's pretty spooky.
Yeah. And it's really makes a difference in terms of outcomes. And these are important things. And those numbers are, I believe, as high as 20%. So it's actually 16 or 20%. So they're actually quite significant.
Wow. Something that has never come to mind. I'm sure it shows up in malpractice suits all the time.
So that shows that inclusivity is really, including that and having that be, when we think of innovation, we always think of the three sort of drivers, right? There's desirability, feasibility, and viability, right? So those are classic. But in addition, you need to include inclusivity and then also sustainability. Those are also things which are really critical.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that, because sustainability has become, obviously, it's been central to a lot of corporations and how they're beginning to conduct their business practices these days. But it's also moving into the innovation suite as sustainability and innovation are working hand in hand. In fact, CEOs and CFOs are looking to the innovation team to say, how can we make this cool new thing sustainable to help us meet our ESG goals, right? Because shareholders are looking at that now. The SEC is looking at that. Where does is design at the forefront of that sustainability conversation in the innovation suite?
It needs to be, yeah, absolutely. And so it's not only design. So you'll have people within, supply chain and then, engineering who will be making sure that they're sourcing the right chemicals to make a shampoo so that there aren't the wrong particulates going into the ocean after you wash your hair, right? So that's important, but that's outside of our realm. But a lot of the physical products which we create, we have a big impact on, right? So it could be bottles, it could be devices, and the decisions that are made early on will impact how sustainable these products could be. So super critical. So we're working cross-functionally. Again, it's really important that we're working with all of these different experts in the field, right? It's that we're talking about force multiplier. So we'll be working with materials engineers, mechanical engineers, all these different kind of things, and chemicals. As we develop, new plastic bottles, we're making sure that we consider plastic reduction. Are we using as little plastic as we can? Is this reusable? Is this recyclable and disassemblable, all that kind of stuff. But the problem there is, going back to testing future experiences with people, is that just because you're making this product more sustainable doesn't mean that people are going to buy it. So unfortunately, yeah, we've done a lot of tests with people, interviewed a lot of people, and that's the truth. In Europe, it's a little different. There was definitely that tipping point, though, if it's sustainable, that might give them enough reason to buy it, not in the US. So we have to still, as designers, we got to make sure that the product is performing as best as it could, because that's what's going to make them buy it. So we still have to keep that in mind. And then it needs to be sustainable. So we have to really get creative in terms of, and be responsible in terms of the full life cycle of this product. So a great example is we're working with at J&J with Janssen, which is their pharma brand, which is part of J&J. And we're looking at making packaging for devices more sustainable. So we removed a lot of their plastic trays and whatnot, and doing this was more expensive. So we got a lot of people telling us, well, this is going to add cost to our overall product, the bill of materials. But then through having tested these new concepts, these future concepts with people, we actually learned that it made it a lot easier for people to remove the devices from the packaging. So that was big. And what was happening is that people were calling into the call centers because they couldn't remove the device and they'd be breaking them when they didn't remove them from the packaging. So all of a sudden, we proved that we could save all that money of broken devices and calling into the calling centers by spending a little bit more on these new paper packages, right? Which we're all using cellulose instead of plastic. So a little more expensive, yes, because it was injection molded paper, but now you could save money, and they actually looked a little more premium. So yeah, now all of a sudden you have that behavior change covered, and you have the cost part covered, even though it costs more in the end, overall, you're saving money. So that makes a big difference. So that was one part of that. So looking at how can you improve the packaging, and, from a viability point of view, sustainability point of view, and behavior change where people will actually react more positively to it. But challenge there as well is that these devices, which are devices similar to what you were talking about before, which people will be using to inject a arthritis medication into themselves at home, these devices are single-use devices. So that's not a great thing, right? Use it once, throw it away. It's disposable, right? So that's not a great thing. So we figured So then we just started, there's an initiative, the team had an initiative, a cross-functional team, to look at how could we take these devices back. So in the past, they had these big red containers in the bathroom. People would throw their devices in there and they'd accumulate there, and sort of people reminded them of their, that they had a condition and it wasn't great. It's a little stigmatizing. So we worked on a new solution, which is actually implemented right now. So we work with the U.S. Post Office.
Oh.
So the U.S. Post Office, it's a cardboard envelope, right? And you put your device back in it. We give it to you. And you put your device back in it when your syringe, right? So syringe has a lot of things, you have plastic, glass, metal, right? Put it back in there when you're done, and you just put it in your mailbox. So one at a time, put it in there. We get the device back. Now we know that you've taken your medications. So that includes compliance. We know that people are actually being compliant with their medication. And then once the devices are taken back, they are robotically disassembled. So take apart all the metal, the glass, and then all those materials will either be recycled for other products or for our products. So we've got a virgin stream of plastic potentially. So, and that's what you're looking at now, a closed loop solution. But that's a lot of work. Like, you have to make that happen. But now all of a sudden you've decreased, and eliminated actually plastic in the packaging. That's great. And it improved the experience. So people want to use that. Made it easier for them to return. So I always think about to return these devices, and then we take them back and we, it's a closed loop. But that's always thinking about people. How we're going to make them want to return this, how to make it simpler, how to make it better than what they have now. So looking at that, we're coming up with a new, more sustainable solution. And that's something which has to happen. Again, it's viability, desirability, feasibility. That's not enough. It's also added to that has to be sustainability and inclusivity. Those are critical for products of tomorrow. And that goes across high-tech digital, interfaces and physical products.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm fascinated by inventors who later go on to regret what they had invented. And we're having this conversation, I'm thinking about John Sylvan, who was the inventor of the K-Cup, those little coffee pods that 1 in 3 American households now have a Keurig coffee maker in their house of some kind. And from a sustainability standpoint, he feels deep regret that he didn't start off making K-Cups from recyclable plastic or making them reusable.
Right.
But, it's a multi-billion-dollar company now. And I'm just pulling up the statistics. Back in 2014, there are enough K-Cups in landfills that would wrap around the world 12 times. So it's 9 years late. It's 10 years later. I can only imagine what as he calls it, the K-Cup apocalypse, that kind of havoc that's been wreaked on the planet as a result of that invention.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are, the mindset has shifted. Corporations way back and innovators didn't prioritize sustainability. We can't do that anymore. Now it's gotten to the point where things have to change, and pods are a big deal. I know Nespresso was doing something that's been found. Yeah. They've taken back the metal pods, Nespresso, right? And they claim they put all the coffee in compost for farmers. And they actually gave you envelopes to be able to return your pods. Probably, I'm guessing, I don't know for sure, but probably 20% of the people do that, right? So it's not a big impact. But you have to design that whole system so that it makes it easy for people to do. Because if you design a system and people don't use it, you're wasting your time, right? So,
right. Yeah. That was a lot, because then you have like a bunch of stinky pods under your counter next to your trash bin, right? Where you're collecting them every morning. You feel really dutiful when you send them back at the end of the day. But, I'm just thinking, I just got braces. I got those lovely Invisaligners, right? But every 4 days, I take plastic out of my mouth. I put it into another plastic pouch, and I put in a new set of plastic liners, right? Of Invisaligners. So I'm like thinking, wow, there are 48 of these that I'm going to be putting into the world somewhere. I have to return them. I'm hoping they clean them and recycle them, but make them into somebody else's future Invisaligners, if that doesn't sound gross. But I'm hoping that's the case. There's something about the supply chain that we're shifting, and our requirements are such. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly. You hit it on the nail on the head as well. The requirements are important. Like in Europe, they're a little ahead of us on that. If the government forces companies to do that, now innovation has a new problem to solve. We have to solve for it and make sure it's a closed loop solution, which is hopefully is giving back to our world, right? Isn't taking resources away. So you're actually improving the world through this experience. And that's where we need to get, but it's not happening yet. And everything, most of the products we create.
So Anthony, give my audience some advice. Most of my listeners have an innovation mandate in their title. What's the best way to work with a design team? And if they don't have a designer as part of this conversation yet, give us some advice on how we can better work with designers to get our innovation to their finish line.
So a couple of stuff. First of all, just setting the context. I think last year, 23 was the big year in terms of design and innovation teams having, and tech in general, a lot of them having been, lost their jobs, right? So I think what's going on is that in a lot of big companies, design and innovation are not considered core functions. They're really companies that are focusing more right now on going to AI. Sustainability is an important piece as well, but also more near-term needs. And corporations are really prioritizing efficiency, profitability, less on long-term needs like sustainability. So that's one piece. But design is really important. So getting back to your question now, having design be part of the innovation team early on is really critical. So whether it's an in-house team or whether you're working with an outside agency, make sure you bring them in as you're defining the problem. That is really critical. If that money isn't there because these changes have been happening, make sure that's a priority, that design has a seat at the table, because they're going to help solve the problem with this lens of people in mind, but also the lens of what this future experience is going to be. If you just start looking at the technology, which a lot of tech companies do, they're just technology first, they're not thinking about people and what they're experiencing. So having designers at the table will give you that lens early on, and you won't be just, what often happens is technology teams or business teams will create what they think is this solution for a product, and then they bring design in to make it pretty or add a logo, right? And that's not the way you should be working with design. Design should be working from the very beginning, so you craft an experience holistically. And what that means is that you're elevating what each of these, you're taking advantage of the great science, this great technology, but from the lens of people. So that it's actually going to probably be more successful because you considered that when it goes to the marketplace, it's going to be more successful because you thought of the experience, you work with design in the very beginning. And that's just so critical. And people don't like to go through that extra step in corporations. They don't like having to do qualitative experience as well. They like to go straight to quant. Big quant, show the product online, get, your ACs tests. There's time for that. Absolutely. But early on, when you're crafting this future experience, you got to do quantitative testing with a smaller number of people and really imagine these have them put themselves in these future experiences and see if it's really answering their needs. And then you could take advantage of these great technologies which companies are coming up with. And that's so critical. It makes such a big difference. And then eventually we'll get to market faster too, and it'll be more successful. So that's the advantage of working with design. There's all kinds of proofs on that. So
yeah. So start early and start often with the design team in the innovation thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Anthony, we've come to the time in the podcast where I ask you a couple of hot seat questions, which I think are pretty lukewarm, but I think you can handle them.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, if you had the opportunity to work on any innovation in the course of human history, which one would you have liked to have been a part of?
So you're saying which team I would like to work on, or is this?
Yeah, which team would you like to have joined?
So that would be, you probably heard this several times before. It's the NASA team, during the space race to get to the moon. And what inspires me about that is that it was really a large challenge. And the only way to solve it was by having this cross-functional team working on it, right? So I think that was really critical. And the other thing as well is that it's the kind of challenge which is never really solved, and it keeps on going. So that's sort of fun. And I love seeing that series For All Mankind, where it just kept on evolving, right? Going to space was a problem which was never solved, and they went to Mars. And so it's a wonderful kind of, and that's sort of a metaphor for many of the problems we solve in innovation too. It doesn't end with one solution.
That's right. There's new and improved Tide, damn it.
Yeah.
We never stop iterating on Tide. Tide will never die, right?
Well, you don't think about Tide, you think about the problem is cleaning our clothes, right? And how do we do that differently in the future? And does that include Tide? And, who knows?
Right. I just marvel at the fact that there's a new and improved something about Tide. Given, I would say every 18 months, I feel like there's something new. Like, can kids keep getting this much dirtier? I don't know, but we figured out a way. So, and in your mind, what do you think is the greatest innovation of all time?
So for me, I think the fact that we decoded our DNA, right, the human genome, that's been really had a massive effect on driving healthcare innovation. A lot of the new sort of cures for diseases which before we thought were unthinkable, that's because of that, right? That's really driven that. And then using data, of course, that's all, hand in hand with that, and AI and all that, those are all sort of embedded in that. And I think that what's nice there is that's really at the heart of people. When we're talking about, it's about design is about people, innovation is about people, decoding our DNA, that's like a real metaphor for that, right? Or that's what it is.
Yeah. And I think, to that point, when we make breakthroughs like DNA, we're not just discovering cures for diseases, but we're actually understanding humanity in a different way.
Yep.
We're understanding how we exist on the planet, how, the whole study of epigenetics and how generations of trauma and joy and stability get passed down through our genes. It's not simply a disease mechanism, but rather we understand who we are as genetic components of a legacy that goes backwards and forwards in our lives. Like it's a beautiful metaphor for so many other things. And I know lots of poets and musicians and lots of other people are inspired and influenced by that kind of discovery, not just scientists.
And I'm doing 23andMe and finding out about my ancestry. It's amazing.
Was there a secret in there that you were surprised?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. Some of my origins, the way they went to the Middle East and Africa, is awesome. I know, it's so cool. It's a 0.2%, but something is amazing. You never would have known without today.
Yeah, and it's like this little tap on the shoulder that we need to be reminded that we're all part of this human family, right? That we're not so separate and different from one another after all. That's the stuff that kind of gets me going about innovation, right? It's not just the thing that we're working on, but it's all of why these concentric circles are around me. It's like all the billowing responses from that breakthrough. And finally, what's something that's really irritating to you or something you just wish for the betterment of humanity that existed that doesn't exist today?
So it's something we're working on. It's a problem which is not solved. And it's just having a much greener mode of transportation. Now we have gas originally, right? And electric, hybrid. I'm talking about hydrogen now. They all have their advantages and disadvantages, right? But if you look at the carbon footprint, none of them are really carbon positive, if you will, right? So I think, and it's something which we're always going to have to do. We got to go move around this big world of ours, right? So how can we come up with some better mobility solutions, right? So they could be, and again, I'm saying mobility solutions. Ford's been looking at a lot of those. So some of it is in the fuel we use, the thing, right? But some of it is just new services. And all around, it's just how can we have less impact on our planet and maybe even give back to it?
Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? Well, Anthony, it's been such a pleasure having you on. Thank you for enlightening us to some of this design conversation that we need to have more of, and not to mention how design, innovation, and sustainability can really work hand in hand. Like that's the trifecta that we love to see. Where can people get in touch with you if they want to tap more into this brilliant design mind of yours? And I also want to give a shout out to Peter Temis and our friends at the ILO, the Institute for Innovation at Large organizations, who actually brought Anthony and me together, one of our favorite networking and learning groups. Anthony, where can people find you?
You could find me on LinkedIn. Yeah, I'm very active on LinkedIn, and I'd be excited to talk with you about either future design leadership positions for me or just the challenges you're having with innovation in your organization.
Outstanding. Oh, thank you so much for joining us today, Anthony. This was just great.
That's awesome. Thank you. I really enjoyed that.